The history of construction toys goes way back to 1880. If you can imagine children back in the 1880s thinking about children's toys or thinking about toys at all. I mean, at that time, I think people would be working hard just to survive. It was a very, exciting time in America. But even though back then people had time to take the time to play with toys. Let's go ahead and see that next slide. All right, right here, it started off with something called Richter's Blocks in 1884. These toys were just as you see them here. They're like concrete. They're made out of rock. And they're shaped into different shapes like trapezoids and rectangles and squares, curves. And they came in a wooden box that had a wooden cover that would slide over the top of it. I don't know how much that would weigh, but it's pretty heavy, right? You wouldn't stick it in your backpack. So let's go ahead and see what this does. Well, look at that. If you put those blocks together just right and you balance them on top of each other so that they don't fall down, you could build something like that. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Can you imagine you sitting down with your parents trying to build something like this? That would take a lot of work. Yes. But very architectural. Well, the children that would play with those sorts of toys back then, they would grow up and they would become architects and engineers and doctors and so forth. Well, there was this one person, his name is Le Corbusier, and he was influenced by that type of a toy where it was a big, heavy block construction sort of thing. But look what he would design as an architect. He would use concrete, huge monolithic forms of concrete to build structures that still stand today and that are gorgeous. They're absolutely beautiful buildings built by architects that have designed things based on this type of thinking of heavy, heavy architecture. Well, as time went on, then the age of steel came around, and now people were making things out of steel in the United States, and something called the Erector Set was born back in 1898. Well, the Erector Set is, as you can see, there are little metal spars that are connected together with a nut and a bolt. You use a screwdriver, you use a wrench, you sit there and you build it by hand. And if a piece isn't big enough or too big, you can actually cut it off with a hacksaw and then make it shorter. And then you could design huge structures like this. If you look at the son's handing the screwdriver to the dad, said, "Hey, Dad, get that. There's a loose screw up there." So, they worked together and they would build these structures. And some of the things that they built back then are still around today. They're in museums. Yeah. Back then they had this different attitude about things. But the architects that would build with those toys would later grow up and build structures like this one here by Richard Rogers. This is in Paris, France. And you can see the exterior of the building is done with like an Erector Set, isn't it? Does it look like it? Yeah, sure does. Okay. The next thing that came up as a material was plastic. And there's a company called Baiko where they would take pieces of an architectural element like a window or a door, a wall, a roof, and they would make these pre-made pieces that people would then assemble to build houses, basically, doll houses, back in 1934. Very popular toy. Did one thing, built a dollhouse, but it did it very, very well. The next thing that showed up on the market was something called mini bricks. Now, mini bricks look just like this. A little rubberized block with a little peg on the top and a couple of holes on the bottom. Does that look familiar to anybody?
Yeah.
What is it? Lego, right. So this is back in 1935, before Lego. This idea came out. Well, one time there was a man walking through a trade show and he saw this, and he used to make wooden toys. And he said, "You know what? If that was only made out of plastic, I think it would do a better job." So he went ahead and he purchased the patent or the rights for this design from that person. And then he said, well, let's try to give it a name. There you go. Let's call it Lego, to mean good play or to play good. And here's the mini bricks as they evolved in 1947 into the Lego. And then, of course, we all know what Lego is today, right? Yeah, tremendous success. Okay. Also at that time, there was a lady, her name's Maria Montessori, and she had a whole idea about how she should do teaching in schools. And she thought that she should involve geometry and kids and going outside and nature and all that. A very, very influential way of thinking and very successful school program. Another toy back then. Yeah. Aren't these construction toys great, huh? 1916, Lincoln Logs, the classic wood toy. It's still on the market today. You'll find it on the bottom shelf. Beautiful positioning in any store. And kids can grab it right off there and say, Mom, I'd love the Lincoln Logs. So, this is a very successful toy. Now, when I grew up like this little girl right here. I grew up and I was influenced by Lincoln Logs. And I think that's what kind of influenced me to become an architect in the first place. I really enjoyed building little houses. So now I get to really enjoy building real big houses, okay? But this toy is funny. It's got a history. The world's most famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, had a son. His name was John Lloyd Wright. And John Lloyd Wright saw one of Frank Lloyd Wright's projects in Japan, the Imperial Palace, and he saw this log system that Frank Lloyd Wright put together. And so when he got home, he said, you know what, I'm going to turn that into a toy. So there you are. He was influenced by that. And this, of course, is when you get serious with Lincoln Logs and you get to be an adult. Build a house. Another thing that came up here was called Playpack. Playpack is kind of a avant-garde toy, colorful, very artsy, and it had little slots in it, and it puts together, makes just things, makes structures, I suppose. Interesting. Another toy you might have at home. This one here is called Busy Blocks by Tupperware. It's a very popular toy, sold door to door by a lot of people. Another one that's gaining popularity overseas is stickle bricks. Stickle bricks is simply like two combs that go together and they hang on to each other that way, and they can build all sorts of different structures. Now this one here in 1993, are you familiar with the name of this one? Connects, yeah. They're right here. They're made in the United States. A very popular toy. They use a node system and a spar. They go from a larger size to a mini size, and they're all compatible. Allows them to build all sorts of different structures. So here we're looking at it like someone built a tank, someone built a roller coaster. Okay, very popular toy. We like toys that are made in the United States. We're partial that way. The next one up here is Superstructs. That one there was a copy of a Tinker Toy, and it's made out of plastic, and that happened in 2003. So we're coming up to modern day, aren't we? What would be the next thing? Well, look at there. 2007, we have Qubits. Qubits. And Qubits is a modular toy. It's built on a system where you have individual pieces. They're all the same. They merely go together like this, and the snap fit together to hold together. Of course, you can pick any angle you want, like that. Now this piece right here is separate. What it does is it goes right on top of there as a railing, snaps on. Then you can go onto this piece, snap onto there, and that's a bridge piece. So you get what they call a shear plane and a lateral support. These are all engineering terms. So a lot of that stuff is built into this toy, but very quickly we're going to go through a couple of more slides that let you know about how I was inspired to do this in the first place.